growing up means a change in scenery. In Giffords' writing, in the Hard Way on Purpose, Essays and Dispatches from the Rust Belt, he evaluates many different themes, topics, and lessons. He does so by telling many different personal stories. Oftentimes, these stories are centered around his hometown of Akron, Ohio, and includes memories from his childhood all the way into his adult life. Two that stand out are entitled Unreal Estates and Ascent. Within these, he evaluates coming of age, growing up, and how home can change over time. The nostalgia provided in these essays made it easy to evaluate feelings Giffords tries to express. These feelings include the scariness of change, how to adapt to it, and figuring out what growing up really means. These feelings and previously mentioned themes are all things that everyone can relate to and are still relevant to lives today. The first essay that stood out was Unreal Estates because it so perfectly describes the changing of an era and how home can reflect that. Giffords talks about his experience as a college-age student working at residential construction sites and the evolution he saw within the community. Looking at this essay, it is clear that an urbanized, more industrial and upper-class-based community was emerging from what he once knew as his hometown. However, deeper into the text will give significance to this gradual change. A quote from the essay reads, "But I began to understand from the inside out that these places had a falseness, that they were inorganic." He is demonstrating the idea that mass-produced home renovation items and materials aren't made like they used to be. That the idea of mass-producing goods and services may make it easier and more advanced to progress cities and towns, however, it was a turning point and a way of life. They wouldn't age the way that he had grown up seeing buildings age. They wouldn't withstand like other buildings would, but these new materials and technologies were the best money could buy in a world that was becoming increasingly industrialized. This is where Giffords began understanding that his home was changing and that as he grew older, he would only see increasing changes. Giffords goes on in the essay to describe how the majority of Ohio is made up of the average middle-class American. He says Ohio and places like it are most often viewed from the outside as simple in this way, as the part of the country where contents of the pot actually are melted into some sort of consistent American stew that can be sampled whenever there's a need to know the true flavor. This quote is extremely powerful when looking at the theme of changing home and life. As explained previously, Giffords is giving a true taste of how the world was dawning on a new time in the late 80s and early 90s. While it is clear that Akron was making a huge change in its way of life for locals, it is important to indicate that America was changing as a whole at this time as well. Along with this, Ohio is oftentimes pointed out as one of the most authentic parts of middle-class America. It is relevant to note that things were changing in this area because this signifies that an era was ending and a new one was beginning in the country. Finally, Giffords says some of us have more, and some of us have less. Some of us think this way, and some of us think that. If you add it all up and divide by 2, you get something in the middle. The question is, the middle of what? This is a powerful quote because it brings together many different people. Throughout the essay, he discussed upper class, middle class, and a change of pace in the country as well as his hometown. This quote summarizes all of that. That Ohio, an average place for average people according to most, is really just made up of a bunch of different people with different backgrounds, lives, and beliefs. Giffords questions the norm with this statement. He takes the question head on and asks the reader what is average, and in turn is really asking what is home, both in a changing era as a whole and as a changing hometown, which is important to the theme of heart and home in the book itself. In the book's next story, Ascent, Giffords brings his audience with him as he is teaching his son how to drive. Their difference in age is clearly shown on the first page when he mentions that he had the very best of Elvis Costello and the attractions blaring in the car when it starts. It is within this essay that Giffords has, from the beginning, began to feel nostalgic. He also talks about his father teaching him to drive and noticing that now it's his turn to pass his knowledge on to his son. This again helps accompany not only the theme of coming of age, but the theme that home and heart are always changing. Giffords is now living in that more modernized and industrial society that he was witnessing emerge in Unreal Estates. He's an adult with a family, and he is raising children in such a society where it is the same hometown where he grew up in, but it's different. Things aren't as simple as they used to be, so much so that even music is a sign of an era past. To accompany this theme and idea, Giffords also states, "Sometimes it looks like a place I've never seen before." after describing a view of the city from where he and his son were driving. To add to this point, it's important to note that home will always be home no matter what, but sometimes watching it change is hard and confusing. People may view a person as many different titles, such as father, son, husband, boss, coworker, etc., but at the end of the day, they'll always be themselves. They'll be the same person who watched their hometown rise from the ground up, and sometimes it will take them by surprise how much time has changed. So much so that even the scenery has changed. When Giffords looks out into the city, he knows locations, he recognizes them from their glory days, when industry didn't run the city and familiar buildings weren't torn down or gone. When he was his son's age, he looked out into an entirely different city, even though they are one and the same. It probably runs through his mind that his son will never get to see this place that he holds so dear to his heart in the way that he got the opportunity to, and the way that made him the person that he is today. However, whether he likes it or not, he adjusts to new views and new ways of life because that's part of growing up. However, he also points out that he doesn't have all the answers or know exactly the right things to say when he says, "I seem to be able to teach better when I admit that I don't know the answer than when I pretend I do." Like any human being, parents are just learning as they go, which is important to remember. Oftentimes, children forget that parents aren't human search engines or superheroes. They're just like everyone else, winging it. Parenting can be pretty scary because one day you're young and just getting your license, and the next your kids catch you listening to oldies in your car while you teach them how to drive. Giffords captures this perfectly. As stated, in this book, Giffords explains all of his coming-of-age stories. Due to this fact, I think it's important to add that he adds in a story about his child coming of age so that the audience gets a taste of how times have changed and how people are still growing up even when they get older and have children. At the very end of his story, after taking his son up Cadillac Hill, Giffords states, "At the bottom, he looks to me for where to go next. Do it again." While this is significant to the story, it's also significant to life. Children look to their parents for guidance as they grow up, and the parents might not always have the answer. However, they can encourage their young ones to keep going until they figure it out on their own, and that's what growing up is all about. To refer back to a previous comment, when you get older, you're still growing up. Your life doesn't just stop when you get a degree, a career, get married, and have kids. There's no specific point in time where life just tells you, okay, you're done learning, because you're never truly done growing as a person. Giffords references to this fact in this essay, that underneath a story about family, there's a message about personal growth and how it never really stops. To summarize, sure, Giffords' essays are meant to be enlightening and tales from Akron's glory days, where the city first emerged on the map as a crucial must-have for the world of industry. He references many lighthearted stories that make you chuckle and maybe even make you feel nostalgic in a way if you grow up here as well. However, it is important to note that there's most definitely a bigger picture to Giffords' stories. He's not just writing these excerpts to entertain you for a few hours, but rather to pass on knowledge and lessons that he has learned in a way that makes them easy to understand. While there are many different themes present, the following is why I have chosen to analyze the themes of the changing idea of home and coming of age and how they relate to one another. This book is explaining Akron to us as an audience and giving us the opportunity to watch how it changes even though we weren't present. It sends a message that home is home no matter what, but in a world that's changing rapidly, it's important to make adjustments, even if that means seeing a place we hold so dearly to our hearts turn into a place we wouldn't recognize in a photograph. This is connected to the idea that coming of age never really stops because we are constantly growing and watching our lives change. There's no magic age or life event that signifies that you're finally a grown-up, and all in all, Giffords gives us hope for the future of our own hometowns and the world as a whole, because although change may be hard for us to witness, it's inevitable and we make the best of it, because part of growing up means that you adjust to a change in scenery.